I am very, very excited to bring in our guest for today, uh, Kristen Gonzalez, running for New York State Senate District 59, endorsed by the likes of AOC and some local union organizations, amongst some great leftist organizations. So, welcome in, Kristen. Thank you for coming. And how are you doing this morning?
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I am doing well. We're about four and a half weeks out from our election, so it's busy, but it's exciting.
And this might be
Yeah.
just,
How are you
we'll get
guys?
some administrative stuff out of the way. Um, but do you want to just go ahead and give like the date? And also, can you talk about some of the confusing aspects as far as like how New York's election is going and how there's like multiple dates for elections and stuff like that to try and get through some of the confusion that might come up?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So our primary date is coming up. It's August 23rd, and it's going to be state Senate seats and congressional seats on the ballot. The reason that this is the case is because as a result of the census and redistricting, we had a split primary this year. Essentially, we started running in February. We launched for once Democrats in state Senate redrew all of the lines. We launched for Senate District 17, which was a brand new Senate seat that covered two of the core neighborhoods that are still in the district we're running in, so Greenpoint and Long Island City. But those lines were actually gerrymandered, and they were overturned in the highest court in New York by a conservative judge. And as a result, given to a special master to independently redistrict and redraw all of those lines. And so that special master, after going through the process, created what we are now running in, which is Senate District 59. And it still has those core neighborhoods of Long Island City and Greenpoint. I live in Long Island City, but it extends up to Astoria in Queens, and then it extends down to Williamsburg in Brooklyn. So it's Astoria, Long Island City, Greenpoint, and Williamsburg. And then it also goes into Manhattan now in Stuytown, Kips Bay, Gramercy, and Murray Hill. So it's the only tri-borough district that exists. And that's really interesting for us as a movement because Manhattan actually doesn't have a socialist elected yet. So this would be the first time that we would have a socialist in office in Manhattan. It'd be the first time that we actually have a socialist at every single level of government in Astoria. So you'd have AOC in Congress, and you'd have our state Senate seat 59. You'd have Assembly members Ron Mamdani and City Council member Tiffany Caban. So we'd have a full socialist slate, and it would also help us solidify our socialist stronghold in Western Queens and Brooklyn. So it's an exciting new Senate district. And again, the primary is August 23rd, but early voting starts on August 13th.
It's a good thing that you brought up the slate immediately, because like that's something before we even get to talking about yourself, and we were having this conversation before you came on about the nuts and bolts of not me, us. And that's something that I feel is like exemplified by the concept of the DSA slate, which I hear is also informally being recognized as the climate slate, and or the socialists for office kind of slate. So can you speak a little bit about the slate and what the platform is, and essentially why this approach of running together, what it hopes to accomplish, and how is it a superior strategy in your way than independent candidates, like candidates running as themselves as with their progressive bona fides?
Yeah, so that's a really important question and point, and it's actually why I decided to say yes when I was asked to run for office. So I'm a DSA member. I've been organizing with DSA for years, specifically in their Tech Action Working Group. I had also done a lot of electoral work with them, volunteering for AOC as a field lead, and Tiffany Caban and other socialist electeds currently. And what I've seen and what DSA has been doing, and the larger political project, is that in order to really achieve and win the dignity that we deserve as working class people, we need a larger movement of working class, multiracial working class people throughout the city. And two, we need electeds that are accountable to us. So it's an inside and outside approach. We've talked a lot and we've seen a lot of the outside approach, right? We're all organizers. We've done the work. We've seen our campaigns. But that inside approach is really interesting because what they've done is since electing, for example, 6 socialists to state government, they've created a block. And this voting block essentially acts as a way to, one, distribute power and build power for DSA, and two, ensure that we are always those electeds are accountable to each other and accountable to the larger movement. So us on doing the work on the ground. And it's called Socialists in Office, or SIO is the term. Our SIO actually meets with representatives from DSA across the city. They meet with community members. They meet with constituents, of course, and they take that feedback, and it's a collective decision process. So that is fundamentally a different type of politics and a different way of doing, of being an elected or being a politician than we've seen before. And it's one that really does achieve our socialist vision because it distributes power. So when I was asked to run for office after organizing within DSA, I wasn't sure because I, like so many people, I've actually worked in the public sector. I'd felt really disenfranchised with the electoral process. But seeing this SIO and seeing this block and this philosophy behind it is what motivated me, because it ensured that no matter, inside and outside, we're still keeping to the core of our socialist principles. So it was a big part of, again, why I decided to run. And with Senate District 59 specifically, I mentioned, 6 socialists in the state government right now. We, I overlap with 5 of them, which is kind of incredible. So not only do I overlap with Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and I mentioned Zoran Mamdani in Assembly and Tiffany Kavan in City Council, but I actually also overlap with Assemblymember Emily Gallagher, who's in Greenpoint, and our current state senator in Williamsburg, State Senator Julia Salazar. So she's being moved over and won't be representing that part of Williamsburg anymore. But the new district would overlap in what she currently is representing. So it's an incredible, progressive and socialist district. And we're really excited to be running in it and being part of this larger project.
Yeah. And speaking on the district, can you just tell us about in this is like you just explained, it's like kind of a new district, grabbing 3 different boroughs or portions of 3 different boroughs in there. What is the district like? What is or what portions I'm sure have Manhattan, some of the upper class, but like what's the rest of like the district like? And also, how do you connect to the obviously probably multitude of different communities that exist within it?
So I am, someone who's born and raised in Queens. I was born and raised in Elmhurst. My mom is a teacher, a special education teacher. I was raised in a single parent household. And this is getting into how I really connect with the district. When I was in about 6th grade, my mom saw that my local public school was underfunded and overcrowded. And after years of seeing her struggle to just keep a roof over our heads and food on the table, she didn't want me to struggle the same way. So she emphasized education as a path to a better life. So she got me a scholarship to attend a private school on the Upper East Side. And what that meant for me is for the next 6 years of my life, I lived between 2 New Yorks. I lived between the New York that I knew, which was immigrant and working class, and the New York where I saw, every opportunity and resource available. And I think that is still very true today. We still live in a city with a lot of inequality, with breathtaking inequality. And it's something you see a bit in our district too, right? We want our entire district to have the same opportunities and investment that, maybe parts of Manhattan get that the other parts of the district may not get. I also think that a key part of our struggle was always rent, right? We're permanent renters. I'm a renter. I grew up, again, in a working class family, and that does represent a lot of the district. So when we talk about Senate District 59, there are 2 main things that come to mind. It's housing, because we are talking about rapidly gentrified waterfronts from Astoria down to Williamsburg. And we're also talking about, parts of the city like Skytown, which have permanently rent stabilized units, but that are constantly having to defend themselves from, $1 billion real estate development companies or private equity firms like Blackstone that are seeking to, deregulate those units. So the fight for affordable housing is actually pretty unified throughout the district. And it's something that I personally have experienced, just someone who, as someone who's grown up in the city and just seen how expensive it is for us to survive here and keep up. And I think the second, main unifying issue and really where I'm coming into this is climate. Because with DSA, I've organized with our, climate as part of the climate movement. And this district represents a battleground for power plants. So I helped organize against the NRG fracked gas power plant in Astoria. And we beat that. We won that fight when people didn't think it was possible. And it's the same fight we saw in Stuytown when they also fought off a power plant. We also have the North Brooklyn pipeline, right? So we have deep fossil fuel interests in parts of Williamsburg and Greenpoint. We also have the largest underground oil spill in the entire country in Greenpoint. So you have climate meeting also environmentalism. What does it look like to have serious investment in ensuring that our waterfront is clean, is not devastating or creating health risks for our communities, and also sustainable, because these are flood zones. And so we're preparing for the climate crisis ahead as well. So this district not only feels very personal to me as someone who's done the work as part of the climate movement and is rooted in that, and also is lucky to be in a coalition that includes the Sunrise Movement, includes DSA's Eco-Socialist Working Group, but also has some serious housing battles. That is also very personal to me as someone who's lived it, and then has also organized for things like public land. I helped start the Western Queens Community Land Trust as part of their founding board, and we just have to keep on fighting for affordable housing, but also fighting to keep our public land public. So this district is, it's a perfect culmination, and one that we can't lose. It is our district to win, especially on these two issues.
Housing is definitely probably the top issue as far as New York City organizing is concerned, right? And especially in the present day with rents just quadrupling in so many cases where landlords are arbitrarily raising rent. And I hear about the good cause eviction bill, which you've listed in your priorities as legislative priorities as what you would accomplish. So can you get into a little bit of the specific work that the slate is planning to do, and you yourself are planning to implement as part of the housing plank? And can you speak to a little bit of what the organizing around housing has been about, and how especially electing you and the DSA slate accomplishes what accomplishments you're looking to achieve through serving in office?
Yes, I'm so happy you brought up Good Cause. It's a bill that's authored by one of our socialists in office, Senator Julia Salazar. She's incredible and has really been leading that fight in Albany. So just a little context on Good Cause for anyone listening, where maybe it's the first time you're hearing about it. It's a bill that it's called Good Cause Eviction. It would essentially give you the right to remain. So the right to renew your lease. If you're what is, considered a good tenant, you're paying your rent, you're not just going to be kicked out for no reason, or your landlord won't be able to hike up your rent. So it's also a way of creating rent stabilization. So it's capping it at 3% or 1.5% the market rate. So it's not only ensuring that we're not priced out of our apartments, but it limits the reasons that landlords currently use, or the tools they currently use, to displace working class people all the time simply because they want to reclaim a unit to hike up the rent price. And with 1.6 million New Yorkers at risk of eviction, it's a no-brainer for us. It is a bill that we deserve. It's a bill that was very close, right, when in this last legislative session, but we saw real estate companies, we saw developers rushing to buy out politicians to make sure that this bill didn't pass. So it's a priority for our campaign because we know it's something that affects the people in our district, but it's a priority for DSA because we're tired of just seeing, it's about power, right? We're tired of seeing the real estate industry hurt our communities and buy out politicians. So I'm glad you brought up Good Cause Eviction, because for us, we've been really focused on it and really doing a lot of work canvassing, not only for our campaign, but talking about it at the doors, because this campaign's a vehicle for organizing, right? So we want people to know what Good Cause Eviction is. As far as our larger housing platform goes, though, we are focused on good cause. We're focused on universal rent control. We're also organizing, I mentioned, public land. So there's a lot of instances where the city and the state will sell publicly owned land to real estate developers. That's why I talked about a community land trust. It's a public ownership model of public land and creates a 99-year lease. So that's a big part of our platform too, is ensuring that we can have community-controlled public land as a way to create permanently affordable housing. And then also doing the organizing through this campaign against luxury development proposals throughout the district. And one of the most recent ones was actually in Astoria. It was called Innovation Queens. It was a $2 billion proposal. It was several buildings, some of those buildings, 26, 27 stories. And it was essentially, luxury. It was luxury development, promising things like community space and parks, things that we deserve, but we don't need to sell out our community to get, right? And of those 2,800 units that they were proposing that they wanted to build, only 728 of them would have been quote unquote affordable. And the current metrics they use to determine what is affordable, so this AMI equation, we know and have seen is not actually affordable or attainable for working class people. In Astoria, in the area that Innovation Queens was proposed, 70% of the nearby residents are Redford, and it's a Black and brown immigrant working class community. Those affordable units certainly were not in the range of what people are making. So it just would not have been in any way beneficial to our community. So we organized against it. We, spoke against it. I've spoken, in hearings and at to the Queensborough president. And the community board, after advocating against it, actually voted against it recently. It's being again reviewed by our borough president. But I think that part of our platform is also doing the organizing work to push off and defend from those billionaire owned and led companies and developments that are just seeking to prey on our community and sell us the lie that we can build our way out of a housing crisis when we know that's not the case. We know we need things like good cause. So our housing platform is policy, organizing, and also public land and public infrastructure focused.
And when it comes to, I guess the goals, overall goals, and this is kind of a question on like the future vision, because there's a lot of instances, and I think you've done a great job of like pointing out where organizations, as well as the DSA, are able to stop bad things from happening, or some bad things from continuing to happen. Where do you see, the end goal? For housing, for instance, is just cause enough? But or what are some of the big plans that you could have, and also of something where working in tandem, where can New York be a beacon for housing, or what is something that DSA and the slate is working towards? Is guarantees for housing the end goal, or just something kind of like affordable?
Oh yeah. So 100%, like housing is a human right, and we're not going to stop saying that. Like commodifying, our end goal is the decommodification of housing, and that's really it. Because as long as we live in a capitalist system where people are making money off of our baseline of dignity, like having a home, then things aren't going to change. So the long term is absolutely housing as a human right, and not even long term. We're taking those short term steps, right? So we talk, it's that approach of like, yes, our socialist values, and then good cause is a start, but it's not the end all be all. It's just that it's a really incredible vehicle to get there in terms of creating rent stabilization, keeping people in their homes. Again, when we're at a time where people are still recovering and still in a public health crisis, but certainly do not have the support that they need. Keeping people in their homes just has to be a priority, and it shouldn't be controversial. But our campaign's actually up against a lot of real estate interests, right? Because a lot of developers don't want to see that. So I think that's really the long-term vision: is everyone deserves a home. It's a right. Housing is a human right. And we're just going to keep on fighting for it, not only by passing legislation, but we're also going to keep fighting for it by doing that organizing work on the ground and saying no every single time our communities are preyed on literally by luxury real estate developers, which happens every single day.
Awesome. And thank you for that, because I think there's a lot of people who are really looking for that type of clarity for, like, where are we actually going? Because yeah, it's one thing to ward off some of the attacks that are coming, but how do we drive a movement to actually reach the goals that we need? So yeah, I appreciate you being extremely clear on that that
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I was also going to add that our district has the largest NYCHA developments in the country. We have Astoria houses, Queensbridge houses, Ravenswood, and I actually have family who lives in Lower East Side projects. I spent a lot of time there as a kid, and so I saw firsthand with our public housing just what underinvestment, disinvestment looks like. Seeing infrastructure completely crumbling, and again, the feeling that comes with it, feeling overlooked. And so, I also wanted to add that in this conversation with housing, is that we got to protect our public housing. We got to make sure our public housing remains public. And I talk about public land all the time. And it is, obviously we are being failed by our federal government. We're not getting that investment, but it is absolutely the responsibility of the state and the city to take action. And it is every single day devastating when I am knocking on doors in those, complexes, just seeing the current state, talking to people, and seeing the lack of action. So I also wanted to bring that in the conversation, because how we treat, the most marginalized amongst us, and it's always Black and brown New Yorkers, we see it again and again, is a reflection of our society. And so this seat's important because this is a moment to really fight for the future of our public housing, and also have it represented by someone who isn't bought out by the people who are, again, also looking to prey on. And add that and offer that to the conversation too. Yeah.
I wanted to kind of slightly switch gears and talk a little bit about climate, especially because of your emphasis on the slate being a climate slate. Now, this might be a perception issue rather than an actual problem, which is that, like, sorry.
I think my internet cut out, but it might be a result of my battery dying, and I realized I don't have my charger. So can I take one quick moment to grab my computer charger?
Yeah.
Sure, yeah,
and
absolutely,
just plug in?
absolutely.
I'll be right back. Play music. I don't know how this works. I'll just be right back.
Oh, no, it's all good. It's all good.
We got a pretty interesting question in the audience, and I don't know if this would be. I mean, like, we're speaking in the electoral context, but I think that, like, it's a pretty interesting question, where it's, how do you decommodify housing without violence when landlords are always willing to do violence even when it's business as usual times? And it's like, I get the, like, I'm with it in spirit, and I don't know if that would be like a legitimate question that a candidate for office is answering without, like, the fear of that getting clipped off.
Yeah. Let's chill out.
Well,
there's discussions that need to happen within organizations behind closed doors. But that's the thing, though, is that, like, and this is where and like, hopefully we can get in this with Kristen, is that and why, like, I think it's important of, like, where, like, having someone that is not only just running with a slate of other candidates, but is also connected with, a movement, is that, like, these elected officials cannot do it on their own. They're not, like, it's not going to happen. There needs to be organizational structure that supersedes, those elected officials, that supersedes those, organizations that are working on the individual issues, to make sure they're all moving in conjuncture. And so that's that's the goal. But I think Chris is back. We good?
Yes. Sorry about that. Okay.
No, that's fine.
No, your tech worker bona fides are now lacking a little bit, kind of questionable. We'll let it slide.
I get that all the time because I have the most trouble with my computer, the most trouble with my phone. I also like didn't do social media a lot before, or like at all actually, before running for office. So I had to learn how to like post on Instagram.
Oh man. Like
So I get
this
that. I get that a lot.
this is
you're
how you reach out to the older generations. Is I also don't know how to post to Twitter. How does that go? But we're working.
so yeah, just
I
to
tweeted. Yeah. Sorry,
just
go
to
ahead.
return to the, I know your time is limited, so I mean, like we wish that we could banter all day long, but I wanted to bring it back to the question about the climate slate, and as I said, like it might be a perception thing that climate, on the one hand, it's a very base activating. You get a lot of volunteers, you get a lot of people phone banking for you, get a lot of people knocking on doors, and a lot of maybe even a spike in youth turnout for the elections because it's an existential issue for millennial and below. But on the other hand, it is also an extremely important issue. I mean, like the image that immediately comes to mind is yesterday's flooding. The first thing you see is like water just like pouring into subway stations everywhere, like waterlogging and stuff like that. So, can you do a little bit of connecting the thread between climate legislation and how it actually directly impacts the most marginalized working class communities, and what you have in store to especially help and cater to those communities, which isn't just directly tied to what would immediately activate like someone who's at sunrise or something like that.
Yeah. Yes. So climate, we talk about housing. Let's get into climate. So existential crisis, 100%. We're out of time. I'm sure you've all seen the IPCC report. We have 2.5 years left. And let me tell you, the frustration that we have all been feeling and the devastation in Albany that has just not taken any action on climate. We had another legislative session where we didn't pass any climate legislation. We didn't have significant money or investment, anything close to what's needed around climate in our state budget. So with our climate platform, so I think there's two things. I think like one, we've been really hyper focused on the Build Public Renewables Act, which would give us the like legal authority to build renewable energy in New York State. And that is an important and necessary start. We've already passed legislation that says that we have a goal of getting onto majority renewable energy by 2030. And we are only at, 4 or 5%, something that's abysmal. So we need it. It passed the Senate in Albany, and then it got to the Assembly, and it wasn't brought for a vote. And what that showed us in the climate movement was, one, the like work of even getting that was a bill that DSA wrote, right? That was a socialist bill that we pushed, that we can pass legislation. So it showed us that, but it also showed us a chronic problem in Albany, which is the power that comes with the speaker, right? The way that power works in Albany. So the bill wasn't brought for a vote. We had even gotten over 83 assembly members on board. We had done the organizing work. We had brought together a coalition of not only DSA, but again, you mentioned Sunrise. We had been so many other climate organizations doing the work to lobby for this bill. And we still didn't get there. So it is an urgency for having new people in Albany to fight and continue to push. And it also shows, and I think I heard something about like y'all were talking about movement. It also shows why that movement and movement accountable electeds, why that's so important, because again, it's about decentralizing that power. When a movement gets someone elected into office and that's who they're accountable to, then they're not so scared of a speaker. They're not so scared about voting for a specific way for legislation because the speaker's power to punish them doesn't go as far because they know who they're accountable to. And that's what's really happening, right? In Albany, in both the Senate and the Assembly. It's also happening in our city government. We saw that recently too with the budget. So the power of it showed us the power of the movement and how far we can get, but just how much work there is to do. So yes, so passing legislation, what's going on with BPRA, that's like priority and centerpiece and focal point of our campaign. Then the second thing I was talking about is just how it relates to the district, right? So we have BPRA, we have that citywide, we have that large movement. With Senate District 59, I think you know, in your question, you were talking about working class communities and how it affects us. It is always us. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but it is always us that pays the most for any crisis. We were the most at risk in our last public health, in the COVID health crisis that we are still in, and we certainly are most at risk in the climate crisis. And we have already seen that with Hurricane Ida. We had neighbors right here in Queens pass away in basement apartments because their basement apartments got flooded. And that is unacceptable. And it will continue to happen unless we take any action on climate. So we saw that. We saw us, our neighbors, literally, when we say our lives are on the line, quite literally, our lives are on the line. And then we had a session after that that didn't pass any climate legislation, which is a clear signal to us that our Albany is working for fossil fuel companies and certainly not working for us. So yeah, with our Senate District 59, we are at risk of flooding. You mentioned the subways the other day. With this heavy rain that's just going to keep on happening, we're going to keep on seeing that kind of flooding. In 59, we have Astoria, which is, again, you'll also see flooding, but it's also Asthma Alley because of the power plants that are close by. Another reason why we need cleaner energy. We have serious health impacts to our Black and brown communities here. We talk about Greenpoint and Williamsburg. I mentioned the North Brooklyn pipeline, where it meets the national grid, and then I also, had mentioned some of the environmental crises that happen, like the largest underground oil spill in Greenpoint. That sparked the same thing: health crises for working class communities in Greenpoint, and generations of families who had family members pass away because of the toxic oil spill. So we have been deeply affected by climate, deeply affected by environmental catastrophes in Senate District 59. And this has to be, this not only a campaign, a vehicle for organizing, and it has been a vehicle for organizing for things like when we talk about our climate legislation and BPRA, but organizing on the ground around that, getting more green space, because we know green space will soak up floodwater, advocating for more rain gardens, advocating for more green roofs, advocating for all of the green infrastructure that we need, and the investment in more of that green infrastructure, because that investment can actually create union jobs. So it's been that vehicle, but it's also an important and urgent moment to not we're up against those fossil fuel interests, to not to have the seat won by our movement, and not have another politician come in that isn't going to center climate the way that we have, that is going to vote for austerity budgets that do not have money for climate. So in both of those respects, climate has just been the centerpiece of this campaign, along with housing, the two centerpieces.
And with someone like Eric Adams, how does a block, and hopefully, that's getting stronger, within an overall Senate that's not necessarily friendly to socialists, but for one, how does the block, even try and deal with a mayor like Eric Adams who, the reason how does the how does the like a cop win off of the George, the year of George Floyd protests, there's a lot of political dissecting to do there, but how does the block deal with someone who who literally feels that progressives are too far left, who wants to keep funding police, who doesn't want any of these climate change, doesn't want any of these housing things? How do you deal with the mayor?
After screaming into a pillow for an hour, no, I mean, it's just it's always incredible to me, and it's something I've seen my whole life, right? It's like the scary left, scary, socialist. But these things, asking for dignity, asking for a New York that works for all of us, it shouldn't be controversial. And when you talk to people at the doors, even if they're a DSA member, not DSA member, you get people from all ends of the left, all ends of the political spectrum. When you talk to them about what it means to have housing as a human right, make sure everyone has healthcare, make sure that we're protecting our communities from climate moving forward, making sure that we're investing more in our public schools, and not passing budgets that literally defund our public schools, like the most recent one we have, people agree. And so that rhetoric we see from Eric Adams, that's to benefit Eric Adams. It's to keep us divided, to create that fear mongering when he's like, oh, you're, these far leftists, these clowns that are protesting for basic dignities. That's to benefit him, and not, the job of this campaign, the job I've always seen as a job of any campaign is to spread a political consciousness, political education, and that's what we're doing, and it works and it's effective. So we don't let that, it's hard to deal with, but it definitely doesn't get in the way of us doing the work, because we're doing the work, we're on the ground, we're knocking every door. When it comes to our larger organization, you talk about our slates and our socialists in office. So, I was not only do we have our SIO block, right, the socialists in office, I was also running as part of a slate, a Green New York slate, with assembly candidates and another current state Senate candidate, where we had those same policies. How we really deal with it is just reminding people that there's a lot of power in having a slate and a lot of power in having a block. Because when we talked about Albany, how those specific speakers wield a lot of powers, it's the same thing with the mayor, and it's the same thing with the speaker of city council. So we currently have two socialist city council members. We have Councilmember Tiffany Caban and Councilmember Alexa Aviles. In our recent budget, guess who voted no? Our socialist city council members, along with some key comrades who have also endorsed us. For example, Councilmember Shi Ase, who also endorsed us and also voted no on the budget. And the reason they were able to vote no on a mayor's budget that defunded our schools, that didn't, again, really represent our communities or best interests of our communities, was because they had not only each other to lean on, but they had the larger movement behind us. They had the people who knocked doors to tell their neighbors in their districts why it's important that they voted no on the budget. And so whatever, we saw in a story of Tiffany Caban, whatever retaliation the speaker and the mayor took against her for voting no on the budget, which was, specifically cutting or taking her name off and cutting funding for literal youth programming in Astoria, we were able to fight back. We had the larger movement. We got the word out, and Tiffany will always have her community behind us. It doesn't put her seat at risk because her power comes from us. It does not come from the Democratic establishment. And that moment, her ability to vote no, her ability to stand up, our ability to fight on budget cuts, and literally see the Speaker of City Council have to answer to that, shows our power. It shows what it means to build power and why it is so important that we keep doing it on the city level, that we keep doing it at the state level, and we keep doing it at the federal level. We have to continue at every single level of government, because it takes a block to get anything done. It takes a movement to protect our electeds when these establishment and deeply entrenched, career politicians who are bought out seek to undermine that power or seek to punish us for wielding that power. And in this race, specifically in Senate District 59, I'm actually up against one of those deeply entrenched career politicians. And I'm actually up against another Crowley. So if that name sounds familiar for folks, I'm running against Elizabeth Crowley, who is the cousin of Joe Crowley, the congressman that AOC beat and unseated. I also overlap with AOC in this district, so we're up against the same family. And Joe Crowley, who is now a lobbyist, who has now represented fossil fuel companies, who lobbied against Build Back Better, is raising hundreds of thousands of dollars for his cousin, Elizabeth Crowley. So they are running. People are lobbyists. We just got the filings, y'all. It's lobbyist money. It's lobbyist money. It's union money. It's wealthy New Yorker money, because they are rushing to fund her campaign because they are so scared. They are so scared of what it would mean to have a movement candidate win this seat. And so with yeah.
Well, and I think we're gonna get into your specific race. I did want to one thing with someone like Eric Adams, the fact that he was like a cop and everything like that. The response to arguments for defund police, which like when you talk about the NYPD, has a budget that beats out most militaries across the world. There's a few dozen, maybe a few dozen countries that have a bigger military budget than the NYPD budget itself, right?
Oh.
But going to a place like Rikers Island, um, what is I guess yeah, what is the DSA slate for a place like Rikers Island? Are you working with these groups that are trying to get it shut down? I know there's also been a plan to just spread the wealth among prisons amongst the boroughs. So what's your take on the prison industrial complex and specifically Rikers Island?
So, it's not in our district. I just like flagging that because I think sometimes people, it's in Tiffany Caban's, but it's not in our part of the district. But that does not mean that we are not going to use this Senate seat as another way to organize in solidarity with her, or organize with criminal or organizations that have been fighting around criminal justice reform, have fought for bail reform, and so much more. It doesn't mean we're not going to keep doing that work and use this seat as another opportunity to say that our current prison industrial complex is just another way of punishing Black, especially in New York, Black and brown New Yorkers, punishing the poor, and that we need serious reform. And, I actually am hoping we're trying to see if we can get a visit. I know it's been a really big struggle to even get electeds, a chance to visit and see what's happening. But we know that the struggle to get any sort of insight and transparency is because, prisons don't like Rikers, who have just completely, just human rights violations, just completely like violated basic human rights. They don't want us to see that. So I think, with our criminal justice platform, with the electeds that are already doing the work, like Councilmember Tiffany Caban, obviously we're on the state level, so we're going to be organizing to support them and the work they're doing on the city level, because we can't, we can't control the city budget, but we will be pushing for that reform and for things like bail reform at the state level. I will also just call out that recently we had another community member die in Rikers, and it is unacceptable, and it's going to keep on happening. So any inaction or any shying away that I have seen from other people in my own race or politicians today is just enabling a place like jails, but specifically Rikers, to continue to kill our community kill members who certainly deserve to have a baseline of human dignity and human rights while there. We shouldn't. It's devastating, and it has to be called out. So we've been talking about it a lot, and we're gonna keep on organizing.
Okay, yeah. So now to switch gears and come back to focusing on your race. I think you brought up that you're running against Liz Crowley. Like the filing deadline and the numbers came out that they seem to have raised like 500 grand, and you're at like 160 something. And your average donation is obviously going to reflect a more grassroots support, like something 40 or $50 is what I think I saw. But on the other hand, like Liz Crowley seems to have the endorsements, most notably of AFL-CIO. And I want to ask, although it's kind of like you're preaching to the choir here, in terms of that your movement has like the broad base, like multiracial, multicultural working class support, because the younger multiracial working class is increasingly swaying progressive. But on paper, and especially when they're going to blast out ads saying that like this person has union membership, like broad union support, and is also touting herself as the pro-choice candidate. I mean, like, it's not to say that you are not. Clearly you are too. And is touting support and having worked with Planned Parenthood and stuff like that. It's like the average working person is going to hear these things and think that, okay, I think like basically as a worker, I think this person is who I support, because that's also where the Democratic Party is going. So can you speak a little bit to, in addition to reaching out to working class people who are already familiar or like adjacent to DSA and therefore are more inclined to come on board, how you do outreach to working class voters who might like just be hearing about this campaign by through TV ads and think that like Liz Crowley is the pro-union candidate and the pro-choice candidate?
Well, I would say, so we do a couple of things. We do the work. We like hit the doors. We've hit tens of thousands of doors in this campaign, and that's the best way to meet people where they're at, right? Is just having a conversation, meeting people at their homes. So those TV ads, right? Those mailers, those scary mailers only go so far. I think, and that's also where we not only reach out to new people and bring new people in, but we also explain why it's important. We were just talking about criminal justice. Like, yes, you may have like the support, like Liz Crowley has the support of the police unions. That's why where we have the conversation that we need to fully fund when it comes to public safety. It means fully funding our communities, not just pouring money into cops. It doesn't mean, it also means no new jails. It means closing Rikers. Like we say those bold things, but we have that conversation at the door. And I think having those conversations is what reaches out to new working class people who may not already be DSA members, but pulls them and builds our base, pulls them into our movement, right? And I've had volunteers for our campaign that have shown up because I canvassed them at their doors, or because a volunteer canvassed them at their doors and said, I really, really loved what you or they had to say, and so I'm here and I'm showing up and I'm also doing the work. That is building the base, right? When it comes to how our opponent Liz Crowley is positioning herself in this race as this union candidate, yeah, she's had a lot of union support, but that doesn't mean we don't. We actually got the endorsement of 1199. We're endorsed by the Social Work Union. I grew up in a union household. I actually grew up in a UFT household. So I know what that is like. For us, having a union job was the difference between my mom working multiple jobs to make ends meet. She went from, cleaning, sweeping salon floors and cleaning houses on the weekends to having a paid union job with healthcare and benefits that gave us a stability that kept us in our home. So I understand the need for more union jobs and protecting our union jobs. And I would say that we even take it not only from my personal experience to our already building union support, but we are taking it to the next level in this campaign too, by supporting for example, Starbucks workers in unionizing. Because we have two unionized Starbucks in Senate District 59. We're taking it a step further by supporting tech worker union efforts, right? So we also acknowledge that, yes, it is great to have that, protect current union jobs, but how can we take it further? How do we still, expand and build a movement around creating new union jobs? We saw with the Amazon workers union, and we want to see more. And I see us on the front lines of that work much more than our opponent. And I think that's the biggest difference. Yeah. And I think, when it comes to the larger theory of change in the campaign, I think we could not be more different. When it comes to having, yes, you may have union support, but we see the machine support. We see the Queen's Democratic Party for what it is, and we can't trust the same political machine who got us into so many of these messes, all of these messes, to get us out of it. And when we talk about that, I think universally people have been agreeing at the doors. And it doesn't matter what part of the left they're from. And that's when you bring, like you were saying, when you bring more people into the movement, understanding the larger importance of a race like this, and that gets the buy-in and really creates the solidarity too amongst so many different types of working people throughout our district, who want to show up and say your struggle is my struggle, and that our power is in the collective, and that we're not going to let another machine win, and certainly not in our backyard, because it's about damn time for change.
And I have I'm going to ask for you to speak for the block, the block of candidates, if to the best of your ability or the most you feel comfortable with, because and this is something we've seen if for people who've been following the socialist slate of candidates that running in New York, there's a group that runs, some are successful, some are not successful, the movement continues, so, like a group runs, some are successful, some are not. So, I'm assuming that the slate understands, that some will win, some will not. Where do we go from here? And I'm asking this, just for you to speak as a slate, because I, like you're gonna win your like races. People work, people get on the doors. This is winnable. But as a slate, where does the movement go? Beyond just running for an office.
If I could also contextualize it slightly a little bit, I think this would help, because last year they, like you mentioned, two city council members, Tiffany Caban and I forget the name of the other person, but four others lost. And sorry, say the name again.
Alexa Vilas. Yeah.
Right. And Alexa, okay. Four people lost the races, and at the time, people, and especially after an Eric Adams victory, they were keen on pronouncing that the DSA is on decline or something like that. But this year, it's kind of back with kind of almost a vengeance, where you have 13 candidates running as a slate, and launching with the endorsement of AOC. So can you speak to kind of like the strategy going forward, like depending upon the number of candidates who might succeed or fail in this case, and like what's the work going forward? How does the movement build, like maintain momentum going forward? Yeah.
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about it. It's like, where do we go from here? What do we do? Like, how is this all? It's not one campaign, one seat. So even in running, I'm already thinking about like, what are we setting up? Like, how are we making it sustainable and permanent? So with the larger slate, I'm really excited because in this last, election cycle, we defended every single one of our socialist seats, and we added a new one in the Hudson Valley with one of my slate mates, Sarah Hanna, who is an incredible climate organizer who beat former assembly member, soon to be Kevin Cahill, who had also not taken action on climate in years. So we woke up in a world after Election Day where we not only capped with overwhelming support in their districts. When you look at, for example, Assemblymember Emily Gallagher, who won her race by over 80% of the vote with someone primarying her, not only defended them, but we woke up with a new socialist in office. So it is working, especially in a place, creating solidarity, not only in New York City, but expanding to the Hudson Valley. That is a symbolic victory that also proves that our movement is spreading. We will continue to win. We will continue to grow throughout this state. And that is so exciting. I will also say, you mentioned the reality is, like you mentioned, the city council races. Some of them had not in city council gotten elected. But that's how a movement works. It takes a lot of us to run for one of us to win. And we know that is part of the work. We know that is necessary, because in every single race that we run as an organization, every race that we run and we're creating and strengthening our relationships with other organizations across the city, whether it's Make the Road, whether it's New York Immigration Coalition, Sunrise, the Working Families Party, every race where we do that, we build our base, we build solidarity, is building our power. And so even, with our city council races, even for the seats that we didn't win in city council, those volunteers don't go away. Those new members don't go away. The relationships don't go away. And it is this stepping stone every single time that we build off of. My race is a result of and has volunteers that were from AOC's race, from Assemblymember Zahran Ramdani's race, from former city council candidate Jesleen Kaur's race. So you have all these people who are now trained organizers, and that helps enable a race like this, where we know we're going to win because this is our socialist base and we are hitting those doors. We just got to keep hitting those doors. But we also know that after this, not only are those people more trained, those people are training new people. And all the volunteers who got trained in our campaign are going to go to the next one, and then the next one, and the next one. And that is the long-term movement, and that is the long-term vision for us.
Yeah, so Marcus usually has I mean, he's hidden it with his backdrop right now, but he usually used to have this sticker on the wall that says "Left of Bernie," and that's something that like is also true of this show itself. To put it mildly, I mean, you'll probably, if you've looked into it a little bit, you'll know the politics is not, it's not just, it's even left of the DSA. And one of the things that was brought up by an audience member before that, a little earlier, Reverend Ravens shout out, is that, like, for example, using the example of the New York City flood, the flooding of the subways, a lot of things are crumbling, a lot of the pain is being felt immediately, and the movement, however, takes a long-term investment. So kind of like what how do you grapple with this idea that like you're in it for the long haul, you expect the people who are working to be in it for the long haul as well, and the people who want more immediate results, they're being deceived by people who are saying that, like, if you vote for me, I'll like solve all of your problems and stuff. But you are having to be real with people saying that it actually takes time. So how do you square these two, where you're not, contrary to how your like socialists are portrayed, you're not promising people ponies, but essentially telling them the real deal, straight talk thing of that it's going to take a while. And in such cases, how do you address the pain that is being felt now? Like, what are some ways in which people can not just cope but also fight back against the immediate kind of pains?
Yeah, I think that's like a balance we have as socialists. It is the larger like movement and larger moral victories we're always talking about that are long term. But then the immediate, like, how do we still talk about bread and butter issues at the doors, right? And it's important to talk about them because and especially right now. So in June, we saw historic low turnout, right? And it's going to be even lower in August because it's an off-cycle election. People don't know about it. It's a brand new Senate seat. So it's all about it's hard to get people motivated to get out and vote on a normal year, but it's also especially hard in an off year, in an off cycle. So that's why we're raising a lot of money, right? That's why we're hitting the doors. That's why we've got to do the work, and we are doing the work. But in hitting those doors and having that conversation, part of what we have to acknowledge is, people have been voting and they're still seeing their rights stripped away. People have been voting and the buses and trains still suck in the city, and MTA prices are going up. People have been voting, but it's still expensive as hell to keep their apartment, and they can barely make it, and food is going up. Like, we have to acknowledge that there is an immediate pain that we all feel too, right? It's not like, oh, like we feel it. We live it every day as well. So yes, we have to balance that, like, our socialist principles, and talk about the movement and the long-term work and why that's important and why we need to get that buy-in. But we do it in ways that are, concrete. So I love to talk about Build Public Renewables Act. We need renewable energy, cleaner energy. Makes sense, right? But also, that's a way to cut your Con Ed bill, because a lot of people saw their Con Ed bills go up. They saw it double, triple, this year. And the reason that happens is because Con Ed's a monopoly, and it's a private company that uses public infrastructure and can do that. So we need something like the Build Public Renewables Act, so we can build publicly owned, publicly operated, union job energy that can help reduce our energy bills. So I think that's like a concrete way that it improves someone's life. Concrete way, it's like you can pass rent stabilization. You see that stimmy. You don't get that huge. You have a right to renew your lease. Another concrete way, though, with a seat like state senate, and we have to remind people that it wields a lot of power, is there's a budget that comes with it, right? So that budget can be given to it's to fund our community organizations, fund community work, do constituent services, which I certainly, in my own experience, have not seen enough. I am very proud of the work that our socialist electeds have done around constituent services. I've not seen every elected use the budget for constituent services the way they should, because it should be a hub for organizing, a hub for political education, and a hub for supporting our community members. So we really need, like, we need to remind folks that even one Senate seat can have a lot of power and a lot of immediate positive impacts. We can work. It's a lot of agency work too. It's not just passing legislation. At the end of the day, running for a state Senate seat, you're also just doing a lot of agency work to push, for repairs in NYCHA or for pushing repairs on our crumbling infrastructure around us in the MTA, because that's controlled at the state level, or pushing for literally working with city to make sure that, things like sanitation, that our parks have the right enough money to be well capped so that people have green space, because having access to green space is a dignified life. It also helps with flooding. Like, it's reminding just all these concrete ways that just one seat and electing one seat is urgent, why you should get out and vote, and why we could immediately, impact your life. So yeah, it's a good question, and it's one that we've been thinking a lot about in the context of a demotivated base and a low turnout year. Yeah.
Well, Kristen, thank you so much for spending this time for us. And like, especially too, is like after we were just saying,
Yeah.
we got so many more, stuff that I'd love to talk about. I've got, I'm a reformed Democratic staffer, so when you talk about constituent services, that's something that really like piques my policy wonk interest, and something that's like extremely important. I think it gets overlooked. For some people kind of wade into the political issues, but it's a very, very extremely important thing, because it's literally how these officials should be connecting to their to the people in their district. But thank you so much for coming. Please let people know, and we're dropping the links, but how they can not only help support your campaign but support the movement that you're a part of.
Yes. Thank you for dropping the links. I just want to thank you both for having me today, for talking to me. If anyone has questions that we didn't get to or anything from the chat, I really didn't get a chance to kind of like look through, you can reach out anytime. I know our website's in there. Our email is info@gonzalezforny.com. And please, if you can, we got a few weeks left. So if you can donate, because we need the money for mailers, our field operation, our infrastructure to get us there. And if you can knock doors, please come out, because we're going to need as many of those folks, as many people as possible.